Americans know the Puritans and the Pilgrims settled in New England. And in Virginia, the Jamestown colony, and that later grew into the Virginia planter colony, the plantations. And for Americans, to the extent that Americans know about anything about early American history, they know those things. They know that there were the Puritans and Pilgrims, and they know that the Thanksgiving holiday comes from the Pilgrims, and they know about the South and the planters. And they, I think, have this blank spot covering the whole area between, because there's an enormous area between New England and Virginia, and it encompasses all of what would become 5 states: New York, New Jersey, most of Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Connecticut. That was New Netherlands. That was the Dutch colony. And it is this amazing blind spot in American history that people for the longest time, I mean, they would, in books that cover colonial America, they would give a few paragraphs to it, but really, typically not much more than that. And it was easy to overlook, partly by virtue of the fact that America, as it came into being, and even after it, after the American colonies had their revolution against England, they still sort of saw the world through English eyes. And the English and the Dutch always had this very strong competition, several wars in the course of the century. And the English basically despised the Dutch. And Americans, I wouldn't say they despised the Dutch, but they just ignored it because the English did. Once the English period got underway, so to speak. And so it wasn't a case of sort of willful suppression of what had happened. It was more that once the English took over from the Dutch in 1664, they just started writing their history from what mattered to them, and the Dutch period just didn't really matter. That started to change in the 1970s. In the 1970s, that was the period when history changed, when history was, before that history was about kings and generals and the important men, they're always men. And starting in the 70s, that's when social history came into being. Am I talking too fast? Okay. I want to get everything in. Social history, which focused on ordinary people and on groups, ethnic groups, Hispanic Americans, African Americans. And so, in a strange way, the Dutch colony, the Dutch presence in early America was part of that. And it happened that in the 1970s, there was an effort that got underway to start to do a reappraisal of the Dutch colony. And it takes decades then when you're to develop people who have PhDs in the field and who are writing about it and researching it, before you build up a body of material that it can start to make a difference. And I think that's where we are now with all of this.